to my little country kitchen. This is Auntie Emm's cooking basics for the beginning home cook. And today, to start us off, we're going to make a very simple cornbread recipe. And this recipe I did not make up. It was originally on the box of Albert's cornmeal, but they changed the recipe on the box, so you can't get the original anymore. But fortunately, I kept an old box because I like the old recipe. So I will also type it out in the box below on the video. But I like it because it's versatile, as long as you kind of follow the basic ratios, the leavenings, the dry and wet ingredients, and follow a few basic tips. You should come out with successful cornbread every time. So I have all the ingredients here. The first thing I always recommend, and every cookbook pretty much says the same thing, is to read through the recipe first, just so you know what you're going to run into. Are you going to need any particular tools, ingredients, measuring, what kind of measuring cups or bowls do you need. This one again is a very simple recipe, and you can do it in one bowl. They recommend 2 separate bowls, but I found it works just as well in one bowl. So you need one mixing bowl, medium to large, doesn't need to be too big, and a pan. They recommend an 8-inch square baking pan. I've done it in round pans. I've done it in foil pans. I made like a half batch in the toaster oven, and that works fine too. I have this already buttered pan. I use vegan butter. You can also use vegetable shortening, whatever. This is a non-stick pan, so it's probably not necessary, but I don't like it when it sticks, so I'm always extra cautious about that. Or you can line it with parchment as well. Oops, sorry. I'll try not to make too much noise. So first, assemble your dry ingredients. First ingredient is 1 cup cornmeal. This is a brand that is usually in the supermarket, but of course any brand will do. Looks like I'm almost out actually, so I don't worry about being too precise, which I generally don't say about baking. Baking, you usually have to try to follow the recipe until you get used to it, and then you can make some adjustments. So look at that amount of cornmeal. Perfect. 1 cup. All right, I'm going to put that on the list. So 1 cup cornmeal. And if you want to use like a coarser ground, like a polenta, or just a slightly coarser ground, I think that's fine. Just don't replace all of it. You could, because it might become too gritty when you bite it. So like 1/4 a cup replaced with polenta. I've done things like that before. And then 1 cup of flour. This is generic, all-purpose. I always buy unbleached. It just seems like it's more healthful. And 1 cup. I'll just spoon it in. You've probably heard that you're not supposed to dig it into the container because it tends to compact. So let's just spoon it in this way. And usually they say, oh, level it off with a knife. But again, this is fairly forgiving this way. Don't worry too much about it. So that is about a cup, I would say. See, I didn't do it perfect, but it's pretty close. Good enough for government work. That goes in there. Cooking is not a quiet activity, generally speaking, so I tried to get things ready so there wouldn't be too many loud noises. 1/4 cup of sugar, and you can use different kinds, brown sugar if you want, or raw sugar. I just happen to have some regular old white sugar. 1/4 cup. Again, I'll just level it off in the bag. Goes in there. You can add a little more if you like sweet cornbread. If you want to make a real savory cornbread, you can use less. And I'll talk afterwards about different things you can do with your cornbread once you kind of got the basic recipe down. So those are our main dry ingredients. Now we've got our activating ingredients like baking powder. Always check if the recipe says baking powder or baking soda because they have different properties, and make sure you get the right one. Tablespoon. Usually the can has a level right in it. If not, just use a knife or your finger. There we go. And then teaspoon of salt. I use some sea salt, all natural sea salt. Any kind of salt will work. And 1 teaspoon. Again, you can use less or a little more. I wouldn't mess too much with the salt, but you can change that a little bit if you want. So then we have an egg replacer, and this is a binding agent. The baking powder is a leavening agent, helps it rise, and the egg replacer helps bind it and hold it together. I like this Energy brand, but there are all different kinds you can use. And 2 teaspoons of this are just fine, and I just mix it right in. With that, they say to pre-mix this with water, but I don't find that necessary. So those are the basic dry ingredients. Now you can use a fork or a spoon, but I like to use a whisk because it really speeds up the mixing process. And there's a lot of dogs barking in the neighborhood today. I'm afraid any minute Shasta's going to hear them and start barking. She's sleeping on the bed right now. So the whisk is just a quick way to make sure everything gets blended together. And in this recipe, it's important to mix your dry ingredients very well, because once you add the wet ingredients, you're going to do minimal mixing. And this is actually an important step that some people don't realize, and they mix it away like with their electric mixer or whatever. and it can become tough and dry if you overmix it. So that's why I like to make sure that this part, the dry, is really well mixed. And occasionally you might see little clumps, like a flour or baking soda. And just break those up with your fingers. Whisk away, whisk, 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 whisk. Let's see. Now, at this stage, if you want to do something different, like have like a different flavor cornbread, you can add things into here. For instance, if you wanted a little bit of a sweet cornbread, you could add a little bit more sugar and like make cinnamon or pumpkin pie spice, apple pie spice mix, things like that, and then you might get like a nice sweet, not super sweet, but more of a sweet cornbread. Or if you want something like to go with chili, or if you just like a more rustic kind of savory cornbread, you could add smoked paprika, you could add cumin, chili powder, a little black pepper, really whatever you want. So once you make it, I would make the first time just kind of basic and get the hang of it, and then you'll see you can do whatever you want with it. And sometimes I added dry, like freeze-dried corn, or even canned corn that I've drained, or even fresh corn, pimentos. Again, if you want a savory thing, little chopped green chilies, you add those in with the wet ingredients, and you can get all kinds of nice flavors with the cornbread. You could serve them with soups, with chilies, slice it in half, put a little butter and broil them. It's really delicious for breakfast. So that is pretty well mixed. I can't see any little clumps of flour or anything like that. So let's see. Now the recipe says to separately mix the liquid ingredients and dump them in here, but I find that's not necessary. So liquid ingredients, there are only two. First one is milk, any kind will do. I use oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, rice milk. I've used pretty much everything. Give it a little shake. This oat milk is actually vanilla flavored. It's unsweetened. So this cornbread might have a little hint of vanilla. I don't know. And just 1 cup. You can just pour it right in the center. And then the other thing is oil. Once again, a neutral vegetable oil, canola, grapeseed oil, whatever you use. I happen to have some generic vegetable oil. And it calls for 1/3 of a cup. Just realized I've got the wrong. I got the 1/4. Here's the 1/3 cup. And just pour that into the center. You can cut down on the oil if you are like trying to avoid fats. And maybe like half of that oil, and add something else, like maybe applesauce, something like that. It just should work just as well. Dry my hands. So now, to mix it, I like to use a large fork. You could use the whisk, but whisk doesn't work as well with the wet ingredients. You could use a spatula, spoon. I just happen to like a fork because it does the job pretty quickly. And just stir it slowly and make sure you're getting all the dry ingredients from the bottom. But once again, don't overmix this. So once you see that the dry are pretty well, there aren't like a lot of clumps of dry ingredients left. Really, a minute is probably all you need to mix it. You definitely don't use like your electric mixer. Now this one is a little on the thin side. See how it kind of plops? This will work too. Sometimes I make them thicker. It's because I don't measure that carefully. That's why sometimes they're thicker, sometimes they're thinner. Usually it comes out a little thicker than this, but if I wanted to, I could add like another tablespoon of flour, but this is going to work just fine too. So once you see that it's nicely mixed, there are a few small clumps, that's okay. Then you want to pour it in your prepared pan. This is where a spatula does come in handy because try not to make too much noise. With a spatula, if you get one of these with the rubber tips, rubberized spatula, it's very easy to get all the mix out without wasting very much. And I should have mentioned that you should preheat the oven to, let's see, 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is in the UK or other places around the world, but I know that's easy enough to look up. So this, here it is in the pan. It comes up to less than halfway. They usually recommend you bang it on the counter to get some air bubbles out. I'm not going to do that because it would be very loud. So I'm going to, well, I'll do that after I turn off the camera. Put this in the oven, preheated oven at 400, about 25 minutes. But at around 20, you can start checking it with the toothpick method, which you stick the toothpick in the center. If it comes out without any wet batter attached to it, then that means it's done. Also, you just look for a nice kind of a golden color on the top. So I will bake this, and then I will see you on the other side when we take it out. Hello, welcome back. It is 25 minutes later, and I took this out of the oven just maybe about 5 minutes ago. Actually, that's not too hot anymore. So you can see what it looks like when it's done. There's some cracks will appear at the top. That's a good indicator also that it's done. If you don't see any cracking yet, it's probably needs a little more time. And then right around the edges, there's some golden brown showing up, and slightly brown around the edges here, but most part is kind of a golden yellow. And while it's cooling a little bit more, also smells really good. I wish you could smell it. I wanted to tell you more about different things you could do. I was going to add, and I forgot, but I like to add flax meal to a lot of baked goods. It adds a nice lot of nutrition, a little extra flavor. Usually just like a teaspoon or a tablespoon. So that also adds a nice little flex visually. Looks nice too. You can add seeds like chia seeds, which are really nutritious. If you want something like cumin seeds, which of course have delicious flavor, depending on what kind of food you might want to serve this with. Again, if you add anything like this, I wouldn't do more than a couple teaspoons the first time. Maybe a tablespoon you could get away with, but not more than that, at least until you see what it comes out like, because you don't want to overwhelm it sometimes. You can also add dried herbs, you know, like if you wanted a savory, like maybe oregano or thyme, savory, marjoram, anything like that. Also sesame seeds, you could add that. You could add, I think this is a mixture of sesame and poppy seeds in here that I made myself. Also, if you like the savory, put a little onion powder. Again, I'll start with like a teaspoon maybe. A little garlic powder. They're all things that ways you can change the recipe around to whatever you like, and you'll just see how versatile it is, which is really nice. So what I like to do once it's cooled, probably 5-10 minutes, you can just leave it and let it cool in the pan all the way. I have a little cake cooling thing. There's a word for these, trivet. But sometimes if you leave it in the pan too long, it can get a little soggy on the bottom. So sometimes I like to turn it out, and I just put paper towels onto a cutting board, or you could use parchment. Let's see if this works. And then kind of turn it out. It should fall out easily because we buttered the pan. And then I'll just flip it over. There. Move this so that you can see it. I won't move the camera. I'll just move this over. You can see what that looks like. And serrated knife works a little bit better. It's good to wait till it cools before you cut it, if you can wait that long. Probably at least 15 minutes. This has only been about 10, but I kind of wanted to show you what it looks like. So I will just cut off a section here, and then cut a section here and here. When it's still warm, it tends to break up a little bit more, but I just wanted you to see how nicely the crumb is very soft, very even. If you had little seeds or other things, you would see them in there, or little bits of corn or pimento. One thing, a way my mom used to fix it when we were kids, which I really love, is she would slice it in half this way, lengthwise, I guess you would say. And then spread a little butter on there. put it in a broiler pan and just in the toaster oven or regular oven. And then if you turn it on broil for a couple minutes, butter melts and it gets nice and toasted on the top. And you can put a little jam. My favorite is probably raspberry jam or apricot, whatever jam you like. It's delicious. Some people like honey. Drizzle a little honey on there is also delicious. So that is my first cooking recipe for my new series. I hope you will like it. And if you have something else you want me to make, I'd be happy to try, as long as it's a vegetarian. Or I can make a vegetarian version, which usually isn't too hard for most things to find a version. So that is it. I wish you could be here and have a nice cup of tea with me and have some. This is really great to have with like afternoon tea also. Like maybe Earl Grey or chamomile, English breakfast. Those are some of my favorites. So let me know if you have any questions about the cornbread or suggestions, or if you make it. I'd love to hear how yours turned out. I wish you could add pictures to the comments, but I don't think you can, because then you could show me how yours turned out. So I hope you have a great evening or night or the rest of your day or your weekend, whatever's coming up for you. And I hope you try my recipe, and I'll talk to you next time.